This is a floss tube about cross stitch. I'm Naomi from Belle Stitches Pirates, and it's been a rocky couple of weeks. We lost my aunt in the beginning of the month, and it's not the first family member who's passed. It's probably a little difficult to reach 40 and not have experienced loss of some kind. In 12, we lost my grandmother. In 14, we lost my father. And they were hard losses, but my grandma was a little harder than my dad. My dad, I had a difficult relationship with. And he was sick for a really long time. Not to say that my aunt hasn't been sick for a really long time. But with my dad, you could kind of see that he probably wasn't gonna beat it. With my aunt, I hadn't reached that point yet. So I found her passing slightly shocking. I wasn't as prepared for it as I was with my dad, and even with my grandmother, who we didn't have as much advance notice as we had with my dad. My dad was sick for a couple of years. My grandmother went into the hospital, came out with a diagnosis that she was terminally ill, and was gone within, I think, 6 weeks. But she also actively reached out to the extended family to kind of give us that chance to say goodbye. You know, it wasn't a I'm saying goodbye, but it was, you know, a reach out to have that conversation with the extended family members. And then, you know, shortly after she had talked to everyone in the extended family and had a, you know, a phone visit or an in-person visit, she reached a point where she was ready to go. So she went on her own terms, and she went having kind of settled things with everybody. My dad, up until the end, was still telling everybody he was going to beat it, and it was more we were convinced he wasn't. So it was a little different. My aunt had always kept the communication going, even when she wasn't super sick. But, you know, it was a little shocking to lose her. But I was still more worried about my uncle and my cousins. How they were doing. So I was focusing my energies on checking in with them. And a couple weeks ago, her obituary came out, and was very sweet and very nice, and made me chuckle. My uncle or cousin, whomever wrote it, put the family humor in it, and I could see, like, their descriptions of her, I could see her. But then it's like it sank in. And I realized she really was gone. That it wasn't a bad joke, that it wasn't feigned or a bad dream even, that it really truly was real, that she was gone and I would never be able to chat with her again. And that became really hard. That's really when it kind of not just sank in, but like the grief itself hit. And I had probably 10 days where if I stitched, I might have gotten 100 stitches in 4 hours instead of 100 in an hour or less. I would find myself, I'd sit down and be like, oh, I feel like stitching. And I'd sit down, and an hour later I'd realize I hadn't stitched in who knows how long, that I'd, put in half a thread. And I didn't push myself. I didn't fight it, but the one thing that I definitely didn't have the energy for was pulling together a Flosstube. I'm not sure I'm even 100% there yet. I managed to do an unboxing, which I need to double check and edit, for the Forbidden Fiber Valentine Bridgerton box, or not Bridgerton, sorry. I'm working on the Bridgerton one. This one's a Downton Abbey version. It came and I was really excited and stopped and did an unboxing video, and I haven't gotten it edited and posted. It's like I'll have these very short bursts of energy and enthusiasm for something, and then I'll reach a point where maybe I need to go find something or need to mess with something else, and the next thing I know, I'm drifting off into space again. So, still working through the challenges of losing somebody and the grief and the emotions that come with that. But I'm definitely doing a little better than I was the last couple of weeks. Definitely more inclined to stitch. So with that, let's get into what I did the last 2-3 weeks of January. So my first one, and I should have pulled this out of the bag and I didn't. This is my my collection of things that I need to fully finish this. But I finished Lizzie Minion by Brooks Books to go with Mr. Darcy. So we have Lizzie and Darcy. I need to pull the needle and put it away. And for Lizzie, there's memory ribbon wire to make curls, to put some curls on either side of her bonnet. I think the instructions have you do like a bow. So tie a little bow, and then the leaves get cut out and glued somewhere. There's a whole finishing bit. And then for Mr. Darcy, his hat gets cut out and it gets glued in here so that it looks like it's actually like on top of his head. And he gets like little memory wire roses, and so very cute. Fairly quick little stitch. I think I did him pretty much last year, and a couple of days, maybe 4-5 days. Lizzie took me like 2 days to stitch, and I had started her when I finished Mr. Darcy, but I had like part of the part of her bonnet, and that was it. No hair, no eye. So that's Lizzie and Darcy, and I have all the stuff to fully finish them. I just need to sit down and play with the memory wire and put it together. I worked on Incomparable, the pattern from the Bridgerton mystery box last summer from Forbidden Fiber Company, and I finished the house. The house is all done, and this is like 48% of the pattern is the house. And then we have a couple over here and saying down here and a border, and there's something on the other side. I don't remember what the other side is. I'll put a picture in. But yeah, got the house all done. Most of the lady's dress is this color here, which, as you can see up at the top where the Widow's Walk railing is, it's really close in color to the fabric. So I'm thinking I might, because it's a pinky color anyway, I may pull a DMC that's just a hair darker, and blend the two together, blend the over-dyed that came with the kit and for her dress, because I mean otherwise all you're gonna see is hair and skin, and so you're gonna have some hands and a face and just nothing. It's good. Unless you're looking up close, it may look like she's a ghost, a bodiless wonder. I don't know. So I was doing, for the month of January, I was doing Whipco, but I was also doing Bringo. Whipco, I was about 25% success. Number 2 was Stitch 500 in one color, and without thinking it through, I picked Pandemic, which is being stitched in one color. Okay, you know, very easy to do the whole one color thing, except I didn't have it on my Bringo board anywhere. So I ended up focusing on Bringo instead of Whipco as much. I got number 19 was a to FFO two pieces, and that one's about halfway done because I also assigned a small piece that was almost finished, which is my Mill Hill tea house, tea room. And it just needed the beading. I got the beading all done. And I can't actually show it to you because I did also today glue it to the mat board, so it's sitting pressed between parchment paper and heavy objects, so I cut a frame. I have a 8x8 photo frame, and I cut a mat board frame for it, and then I put a piece of mat board behind it and basically glued the two pieces together so that it's sandwiched all in there. And then I'll put it inside the frame, but yeah, the mat board, when you put the glue on it, it wants to bend and curl, so it needs the weight to smush it together while the glue dries. Good old Eileen. I did get some decent work done, and this was just one day of work. Technically I worked on this 2 days, but the other day I was trying to figure out stitches, and I decided that because I'm a bit of a planner type person, I really didn't want to freehand, while it wasn't difficult to freehand it, I didn't want to freehand this pattern. So I had already done the calculations way back for how long my marked length was, as well as my width, how many repeats that was. And I sat down with, I'll have to look it up. It's an online patterning program. And created the repeat and then did it. And there's also a red and white repeating border that goes in that, in mine, the white section is like a nautical mile, or a mile, kilometer, whatever we want to call it. And then it's got a red and a gold little section that kind of repeats itself. So it's a combination of decorative, but it also is supposed to indicate how big your distances are. And I initially was just going to do the repeat as it was. I played with the design for that one, how it ended up, how it was originally charted. I played with it because it didn't fit evenly between my corners. So I got it to where I liked how it looked. And then the thing that I discovered was when I exported the pattern into PDF, I could then import it into Pattern Keeper, and I could mark it off and count my stitches. So I spent one whole evening doing nothing but drafting the pattern and figuring out the repeat for the measurement line. And then the next evening, I actually started stitching. And I had some of this green and gold section down almost to the end of where I stitched. But then I had just barely started the blue repeat, the blue section. And so I finished, this is all finished minus the red and white segment. And it's about 2/3 of the side done. And in one evening, that was like 700 stitches or something like that, which is a dent in the ocean when you consider the fact that it's 2/3 of a short side is finished, and I already had a good chunk of it done. But it definitely feels like it'll go faster. So I worked on that just the one day, just to knock it off my Bringo. And Bringo was 100 stitches in the design that was called for that day. I'd pick it up and it'd be 300-400 stitches, and then I'd move along. Sometimes I would take a photo part way, and after I'd met the significantly met the 100 stitch requirement per day, because a lot of these I had on there multiple times, and so I might sit and stitch for a whole long time, and then because I have 2 pictures, post it for 2 different days. But break my stitching for the day into half. This is ABC de la Bordures by Jardin Privé. Last time I showed it, I think I had this done and a little bit of the dress and like this top stuff. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'll put a slideshow or pictures with start and finish in to show where it started and where it finished. But I'm getting pretty close to being able to roll the scroll or scroll it to the next spot. There's a little leaves that need to go here. There's some back stitching work that needs to go in up here, and then really it's just I need to do the hair and figure out my skin color, because the flosses that I pulled, since I'm doing pretty much a complete conversion, the flosses I pulled, I don't have a really good skin color, I don't think. I have something that looks like it might work, a section of the floss. So I need to stitch with it and see if I like it as skin, and if I don't, then I need to pull the DMC. The apron, so everything is dyeing for cross stitch over dyed silks, except for the apron. The apron is B5200 Floche, DMC Floche, and the banding is 27 count, which means that over 2, it's like 13.5 count. 13, it probably closer to 13 count, but 13.5 is officially what it would be. And 14 count can sometimes be a little thin on 2 strands, but 27/2 is really thin with 2 strands. So I've been stitching all the floss 3/2, except the floss, because floss is thicker than regular DMC, that actually is 2/2, and it looks really nice. I really like the coverage and how it laid. So that's where I'm at on ABC de Labradors. Gotta make some decisions on a couple of things and then move along to the next segment of it. I have one new start. It's a very pathetic new start. So I pulled a piece of Monaco that I dyed a while back. And I was like, oh, I looked at this pattern and I said, this pattern, I don't see any fractionals. I'm going to stitch it 1/1 on my pretty over-dyed or hand-dyed. And it's really hard to see because all I stitched was the spines, and I started in one of these, and then I spotted the quarter stitches that I completely overlooked. There's not probably that many. I could be mistaken. But there's a motif in the center here. And when I was stitching the V's that the leaves attach to, the branches, whatever we want to call them, when I was stitching them and got to that center spot and I'm counting across, I realized, uh-oh, there's quarter stitches in this. And so then I started looking at some of the other kind of circular-ish motifs. And every single one of them had a few quarter stitches. Well, over one's very difficult to do quarter stitches. So at that point, I called it quits. The piece of fabric is big enough that I can do the whole thing. I can do the whole thing on the piece and have plenty of room. So it's gonna get more or less restarted. I have it on my Whipco board. I have the picture itself. I can insert the picture. Yeah, that's just a pattern. It's a design from World of Cross Stitch, the January edition. Then I worked on Alice in Wonderland by Owl Forest Embroidery. This is the 3-color version, and I am using the écru that they call for. When you look at their overdyes, in the description for écru, they say that they don't actually overdye it. It's just straight up DMC écru. And then they had a greenish brown color called bogwood, and I had some Threadworks. I had a bunch of Threadworks, 11170. I think it's called Pirate's Booty. But it's got green greenish tones and it's got brownish tones. And so I'm using that for the dogwood. And then the red and black, I'm using Dying for You Firebane. And then every so often, like for the queen, for her red hair, I did, I made sure to, like start where I wouldn't have the black come in. And I stitched it kind of around the outside and then worked my way in, which did a nice cool effect. Previously I had the basket, like the queen's head, that section was all done. So what I stitched on in January was this is part 12, and it's this chain motif, this flower tower, this pot looking thing, the cannons, and probably those, I think those are like the fireworks from the cannons, the maid, and this floral border. I had previously started it, and when I started it, I started with the maid and I positioned her over top of the queen. I don't know, somehow when I was looking at the overlap, I got the basket handle and the queen's crown confused for placement and didn't double check it based off of the border here, which you can also see in the overlap, and reached a point where I realized, so I stopped. I ripped her out and I put her away. I just was like, okay, I'm making mistakes. It's time to go away. So I'd put her away for a good long while, pulled her out, worked on her a couple of nights. Each section stitches up relatively quickly, but so she got some love. And there's 19 sections, so 12 out of 19 are done. So if I focus on it periodically, make sure I do a section here, a section there, I expect to get that one done by the end of the year. January, I think I told you guys this before in my last video, but for whatever reason, I really got myself on a kick of working on land that I love. And so I had the whole alphabet and the top border and the eagle was all done. The border was done to like about here. And when I put it on, when I went to put it on the frame, I asked my husband, should I get the top border all the way finished so that the alphabet and all of that's all done, or should I go downward? And he said, go downward. So I framed it up so that the next section was available in an 11 by 11 Q snap. And I have to go back in because there's a couple little things up here that I just couldn't get to. They were just on the edge of the frame. I wasn't paying attention. So this motif has a circle kind of like this one around it. So I need to go back in and I need to finish this. At least I think it does. I'd have to look at the pattern again. But I recall there I needed to go in and do a little tiny finishing there. Otherwise, I did all of the basket with the flowers. I did all of this border. I did this cross border until I ran out of frame. I did this, and so the strawberries are all done, and the strawberry flowers are done, and so's the vine. I just need to, there's a bunch of these leaves, and so like I think there's some leaves here. There may or may not be some leaves in this section, but there's some leaves here. So I didn't get all the leaves done, but I got them pretty close. And then I got the next border and Land That I Love stitched. And then what's right below here is a house. I could have done the chimney, like the top 5 rows of the chimney, before I completely ran out of frame. You know, because as you can see, there's land, and there's how much I could stitch on the border before it got uncomfortable. So I could have gotten, you know, some of the chimney done. But at that point I was starting to kind of be over it. So I finished what I completed the motifs that I had started that were in the frame. And I said it was good, and put it away. So I have the bottom, I guess, third plus the other more or less half, but I've got the better part of 2 pages done on this, along with some other stuff. And you know, for the 1 page, it was fairly dedicated stitching. So I would stitch on whatever the Bringo was that I was keen on. And this was on Bringo. It was, I think, on there 3 or 4 times. And then, so that was on Bringo several times, which is what got it into the frame. And then I was having so much fun that I would pull out a Bringo piece and stitch on it until I was kind of over it. And then, you know, or, you know, reached a point where I was like, okay, I could switch, switch projects, you know, things like the Lizzie Minion. Well, you know, finished it, and I can stitch for another 3 hours. I either pull something new out, or I go back to that. And because it was in the frame sitting on my table in front of me, it was real easy to just pick it back up when I put something away or finished a project, because I had 2 finishes. So I put that one away once I finished the 11 by 11 Q-snap frame section. And then what I put in its place for a bit was Poltergeist Pirates. And Poltergeist Pirates, I did the moon. The moon is 1 page. That's a page. I think the very tippy top of the parrot's hat is on page 1, but it's really just a moon. So for this, I did some back stitching along here and in the dragon. And then I had framed it up so I could go down and start putting in the water. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I framed it up. I based my framing. I did not plan this well at all. Should have got my board, but that's in the other room. So I did my framing more with the focus towards the back stitching, and I had previously back stitched the sail here and the parrot and part of the dragon head. So I was really more focused on framing it where the back stitching was missing. And of course, you know, back stitching, you reach a point where you're just like, okay, I'm over it. And so I wanted to swap back and forth a little bit, do some back stitching, and then do something else. And the something else was the waves. But the problem is that all of this area is also waves. And so I had to start on page 2 of the waves. The waves are like sections about like not even a third of the page. Like if they hadn't put instructions on the bottom half of the page, they could have put 4 pages of waves, because it's just like a quarter page of the charts, which is the very bottom of the chart. And so yeah, so I got some waves in. They were looking really cool. It was not quite color blocking, but it was nice, monotonous. Not even monotonous. It was nice stitching when you wanted something that was slightly stimulating, but not too stimulating. Like I didn't want to do confetti. And I was pulling this out towards, as I was starting to come out of my funk, you know, had a little bit of interest in something new. So having the waves be sort of block stitching, but not completely block stitching was nice. I put 2 hours in, and I'm just gonna put a photo because I've put it up and out of the way. I have a canvas piece, a tapestry canvas piece that I put 2 hours into. I just put a timer on and for an hour and stitched, and then put it, you know, a couple hours later put another timer on for an hour. I had put it on my Bringo for twice, so for 2 hours, and I was like, I'm gonna get this done. And then I didn't finish Bringo because I had one space that I didn't stitch on. And that was my Christmas Club ornaments. I had it on there twice. I stitched on it once. I did not get it pulled out in time. But I did put some work on, and this is kind of my focus piece for February. So this is Tropical Treasures by John Enright, charted by Hayde. And when WIPCA was called for February, one of the goals that I had put on my board was to finish a 2020 project, or 2020 start. I started this in 2020, and I looked at all my 2020 starts. The ones that are left are the monsters, the big ones. I didn't double check that when I wrote the goal. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I was thinking I still had some 2020 little ones. But I looked at everything that I have left for 2020. And, you know, it's like, it's the map by, you know, ink circles. Well, even if I changed it to finish the border, I don't know that I can finish that border in a month. I might be able to finish the border in a month, but I certainly can't finish the whole project. So I looked at all of my options that met the 2020 criteria. And out of all of them, this one, if I put a slight tweak, was doable. So this is the bottom of page 1, and it comes out to somewhere around in here. And I was in the process of doing this diagonal. So I've kind of not done, switched over to a bit of a page finish version, but my goal is to, for the month of February, make this my focus piece and to finish page 1, have page 1 completely done, which we're getting close. I mean, you know, with this being the corner, you know, I've got some odds and ends of greens up in through here, but it's slowly coming. So I'm pulling greens, you know, I'm going through the color list and tagging the greens. There'll be some point where I'll just be looking for the ninja stitches and making sure my diagonal from this point over is complete. And then my secondary goal for it is, once I complete the page finish, which I think I can do well before the end of February, is to try to get the diagonals up into the next page all the way stitched. And I probably won't go very far past the page. I may even stop roughly at the page for the diagonal. So it's diagonal and page finish, which would then, if I've got the diagonals all the way completed up to the corner of page 1, it actually makes half of page 2 be finished. So it's that part of it's a little ambitious, but I'm close enough on the page finish. I think I can actually, by focusing on it, and I'm not gonna do the 50 million projects like I did in January. So doing Bringo was fun. Touching a bunch of projects multiple times was really cool. I touched almost all of my projects. I think out of my 18 projects, I finished 2, and I touched like 12 of them, something like that. With most of them getting multiple days. And I did almost 16,000 stitches. So, considering I had close to, I think I have 5 days where I didn't stitch at all, and a couple more days where I did hardly any stitching, like a couple hundred stitches, hardly any stitching. Even when I'm doing a lot of other things, I usually sit and stitch for 3 or 4 hours in the evening. So to do less than 300 stitches in an evening is a little surprising. I pretty much have to not stitch for that to happen. Or be dealing with emotional grief and distress. So this is the main project. I'm going to be participating in the Olympic challenge posted in Garon's Stitchery group. It's a different challenge per day based on the different sports of the Winter Olympics, which start this weekend. And basically wherever I could, I put my 2 WIPGO projects. Trying to learn from last month where I had pandemic down for WIPGO and didn't touch it because I was focusing on Bringo instead of WIPGO. and I didn't put it on Bringo, so it never went into a Q-snap and got stitched on. So to learn from that error, I started by going through the list of prompts for the Olympic event and identifying which ones I could use this for, which ones I could use the winter sampler that I need to change over to stitching over to. Get some progress on that, because that's my other. So Tropical Treasures is my number 5 whip go piece, and then Winter Sampler is my number 17 whip go piece, which the prompt for that one was to stitch on a house, or I think it was house/shelter. You know, basically if I could interpret something in it as being a shelter. And I looked at my house pieces. Well, I finished the house on Incomparable, the Bridgerton piece. Got that all, that's all done. It's in January. And it says stitch on the house, not a piece with a house, is how I phrased it. So trying to stick to how I phrase things. Bridgerton was out. But when I looked at it, I had 2 pieces that had buildings and houses on them. And one is the Winter Sampler. It's got a church, which could be a shelter, but it's also got houses. It's like a little village. So I have to stitch one of those houses. And then I could have, the other one I could have done was Land That I Love. But I'm tiny bit burnt out on Land That I Love because I spent so much time on it in January. I really don't want to spend time on it, like loads of time on it in February, which a house would be loads of time. So I'm gonna do the Winter Sampler for that one. I put it onto the board or the Olympics challenge a few times. Alice in Wonderland, I'm gonna try to get get section 13 done, which I think section 13 is the cat. The Cheshire Cat. It's like one big huge motif with maybe a couple little accent pieces to kind of as filler around it. So that one could be interesting. And so February is gonna be pretty light in terms of changing lots of projects. I'm gonna have the Winter Sampler, I'm gonna do Alice, and I'm gonna pull out Pandemic, and I can knock out that goal in like one night. But I actually put Pandemic down for one of the Olympic challenges so that I will pull it out and stitch on it while I'm watching the Olympics. And then I have the Christmas Club ornaments, try to get the next one done. And that got added to the list because of the Olympic challenge. One of the prompts is stitch on something with words. There's no real words in Pandemic. I don't think there's any words in Alice. If there are, I haven't seen them yet. There's no words on Tropical Treasures. There's no words on Winter Sampler. And getting an ornament done, not a bad change. So that's 5 projects to focus on, and the big one will be Tropical Treasures getting that page / diagonals finished. So that's my goals for the month. Gonna pop in here hopefully each week. I'm gonna aim to keep that up, even though I didn't last couple of weeks. Next week I will have some finishes to show you, because I've got 2 Mill Hill buttons and beads kits that I've long since, well, one of them has been completed for a while, but I cut the matting for them and set them both to glue, or glued them and set them to dry with a weight before I filmed, so they'll be dry and in their frames by next week, which will be cool. And somehow I don't think I will have the minions finished anytime soon, but I could surprise myself. I may or may not have limited stitching time this weekend, just because I'm working theater on Friday and Saturday evening. So I go to the day job Friday morning and immediately leave there and go to load in a show, work the show for the evening, come home. I'm supposed to get off at like 11 o'clock at night. Probably have to do laundry after the show. And then Saturday, go in and do prep work the show, and pack them up and send them on their way. So sometimes there's some downtime, but there could also be no downtime except for mandatory breaks. So I may get lots of stitching done, and I may get no stitching done. Either which way, Winter Sampler's coming with me, so I will get that. Even if I get just 5 stitches into it during my work calls, I'll get a little something in, and it's small enough I can hold it in my hand and stitch. Otherwise it'd be a Mill Hill kit that was going with me. So that's what I have, and I will put a slideshow of what I did in January, and also the photo of the prompts for the Olympic challenge, and I will put a link to the Facebook post that I got the information from. We're at almost an hour. By the time I add the photos and what have you, we'll be at just over an hour. So you all have a good weekend. Take a minute to say I love you to your loved ones. There's no guarantees that they'll be here forever. And we'll see you next week.